Welcome to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.net. I'm your host, Connie Whitman. Thanks so much for joining us this week. So here's the deal. I get it. Change, hard, right? Whether you choose it or it's thrust upon you, it could be daunting. So here's the deal. I have a free gift for you. If you go to my website, I have a free communication style assessment, gives you your report on your superpowers, just naturally how you show up as you communicate. Blind spot, kind of important too. So you'll get a report for your lowest score in the sequence, and that will shine a light on your blind spot, which is kind of important too. So go to whitmanassociates.com/CSA. It's in the show notes. It's my gift to you. And hopefully it helps you navigate change just a smidge easier. Now, my motivational quote today is by one of my most favorite people that has ever walked this earth, and it's Dr. Wayne Dyer. And this is one of my favorite quotes of all time as well. He says, "You create your thoughts create your intentions, and your intentions create your reality." Now, for the past 20 plus years, I've been studying and truly focusing with intention on my own personal spiritual journey. And I've learned that our minds are actually a tool, like the quote, to help us create the life we desire. And in that quote that I shared from Wayne Dyer's, we think, I think what we think really does truly become what we see in our own personal world. That's where the magic starts happening, though, when we start to shift that mindset perspective. So here's the deal. Getting there takes dedication, perseverance, focus, willpower. And guess what? At the end of the day, it's truly all worth it, because the transformational shift within you as the person, it really is magical. So today, my amazing, wonderful guest is David Richards. And David and we're going to dig in and discuss mindfulness, which sometimes may feel a little mysterious. The reality is each and every one of us is in a different state of consciousness. What's most amazing today is our ability to absorb and share information rapid fire. And we've never seen this before, right? So over 100 years ago, our ancestors might have spent decades looking for information that we go to on our iPhone and we've got it in seconds. So how much more interconnected are we capable of becoming, and how much more conscious can we be? So David, let me tell you a little bit about David. David is a life strategist, international best-selling author, woohoo, and an executive coach. He's been teaching yoga for 15 years and served in the Marines for 15 years. He helps people achieve the extraordinary. And he has 2 books out, which I highly recommend. One is Whiskey and Yoga, very cool title. And the other one is The Lighthouse Keeper. So David, thank you for being on the show. And I can't wait to dig in, because you're cool, man. You're a Marine and you're this yoga author. What? I just think it's the coolest combination.
Connie, thank you so much. What's an introduction? I want to, I'm so excited to talk to you, and it's just it's an amazing time in human history, and you said it right. Just the information we have accessible to us, and what that means for mindfulness. It's fascinating. So yeah, I'm ready to go.
Yeah. All right. So you know what the first question is: how the heck did you go from being a Marine to a yoga instructor?
It wasn't with intention, believe it or not. I don't even know that I saw a yoga studio when I was in the Marines. It's that, it wasn't something that was on my radar. And I got out in August of 2006. And the first weekend I was out, I remember reading a Sports Illustrated article about NFL players using yoga rather, to strengthen their midsections. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And it was kind of this manly approach to yoga, because I didn't know really anything about yoga. So I went to my first class that weekend, and it was a gentle style class. And I remember just doing these poses, and everybody's real quiet. And I was like, okay, we finished. I was like, all right, that was strange, but I'll give it another shot. So I went to a class a day later, different instructor, different style. And we're probably 30 or 40 minutes into class. I'm just drenched in sweat from moving. And I was just like, what is happening? And then you get into Shavasana at the end of yoga, and you just lie still for, 5 minutes or so. And I got out of class and I was blown away. I was like, what happened? What was that? And I realized it was kind of waking up to mindfulness, and waking up to being present, and waking up to awareness. And, one of the big shifts for me coming out of the military was I spent a lot of time in the field. My last assignment was in Central America. So I was working a lot with governments down there trying to modernize their military, but I didn't spend a lot of time in front of a computer with email. And when I left and joined corporate America, I was just deluge of information overload. I would get like 50 email in an hour and trying to track, how do I process this information and the to-do list. And I remember I would just go home, I would be in my car, and my mind would just be this chatter of noise. It would be to-do lists and tasks and things I forgot to do today that I have to do tomorrow now. And when I got onto a yoga mat, that all got quiet and I just got still. And so after that second class, I was like, I want more of this. And a year later, I became an instructor.
It's, you never know when something's going to hit you. We can plan all we want, Dave, right? We could plan all we want. And then you turn that corner and something just clicks and you think like, holy moly, I need more of this, whatever this is.
Yes.
But you can't see it coming all the time, right? So again, coming from the Marines, and I would assume you were probably in really good shape coming out of as a Marine, right?
Yep.
So doing the yoga and sweating your butt off like that, wow, right?
Well, it was, whenever you do something that tests you physically, and certainly there's a mental aspect to being tested physically too, especially as a Marine, it's a challenge in a way. And it's like, okay, what happened there? And how do I get control of this thing? Because I'm not going to let this thing get the better of me. And so that was part of it was almost like yoga was a challenge. And it's strange because yoga is the least competitive thing in the world. It's all about your own individual practice. And it took me some time to realize that too, but absolutely it was this place of what's happening to me and how do I understand that and how do I tune into it? And one of the benefits for me was my dad was in the Marines. So I grew up all over the country. We actually spent 3 years in Japan when I was a kid, and being exposed to Eastern philosophy and Eastern culture at a very impressionable age, I started trying to meditate when I was probably 12 or 13. And it was really awkward. Like I remember being in high school on the coast of North Carolina on Friday nights, and my friends would all be out partying or whatever. And I'd be sitting in my parents' living room. My parents would be out, and I'd be sitting in my living room with I was into Japanese swords. So I'd have like a Japanese sword in front of me and I would try to meditate, and I didn't know what it was. I'd read this book about trying to quiet your mind, but that was kind of my approach. And I didn't have a real good discipline or practice about it, but I carried that into the Marines. And then when I discovered yoga and saw that there was a meditative aspect to yoga, I started to connect this theme throughout the course of my life that, okay, this is the path I'm meant to be on.
Did you meditate while you were a Marine? I'm curious.
I wouldn't have called it meditation. I put myself into relaxed states, especially I remember being in Somalia during Operation Restore Hope in the early 90s, ancient history for some people, but and it was stressful. We were the first Marines ashore. So if you were alive back then and watched CNN and you saw all these Marines coming ashore, that was us. And you would just have to, and there was about 3 or 4 weeks where the Somalis were happy to see us, and then they started to understand what was trying to happen, and things went a little sideways. But just knowing, kind of keeping yourself in a state of hyper alertness.
Yeah.
You also wanted places of hyper relaxation. And so it would be like the middle of the day and you're just trying to find shade somewhere because you're on the equator and it's blistering hot. And I would just try to quiet my mind and just kind of rest if I could. And that was a way where I found it wasn't meditation in that sense that I know it today, but it was kind of meditation in its infancy.
Yeah, almost like a pattern interrupt for what you were facing, right?
Yeah.
It was this opportunity to escape briefly, but So what it's funny because clearly this has been intuitive for you. You just never acted on it because coming from a military family, getting into the military, you're on this very different trajectory, but it almost sounds intuitive for, what you're doing. And I do have to comment, thank you for your service. And thank you, not only because that, you help us stay free. So I love you guys. That's number one. And I'm honored that you're on my show, but two, that this manly, persona of a Marine, and then bringing this genius and importance of mindfulness and yoga, and yoga is a tool to create mindfulness, meditation's a tool to create mindfulness. I'll just share really quick. So I had a reading the other day, and we were talking, and being a business owner for 20 years and then being in sales for 40 years and a working mom and the whole thing, Dave, my mind is always on, always on, always on. And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to, and the quote that says you need to slow down to speed up. Slowing down is really hard for me. So yesterday she said to me, like, you need to like cut some of the crap out of your head. And I'm like, yeah. Like, I know this, what, like how I do yoga, all of these things. But for me to just sit quietly is really, really painful. My husband bought me a coloring book for Christmas. So I says, what about coloring? She goes, perfect. That'll work for you. You like doing it. It'll quiet your mind without you even realizing it. It's a form of meditation.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. We talk about yoga and meditation and mindfulness. There's so many tools to get us to whatever that means for me, for you, et cetera. Right. So that first experience with yoga, you were like, what the hell just happened in there?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sweating my behind off. Like, what? Right. So that's that again, but I think it's been intuitive for you your whole life.
I've come to appreciate that it has. I mean, it was always, I wrote, I was successful in high school with writing. I had national recognition for a short story I wrote.
Cool.
I had poetry that won contests. And that internal expression, that creative expression was a part of that too. And I didn't appreciate that. And so when I got into the Marines, I kind of put writing aside until about 2000. And then I got inspired to write poetry again because one of my bosses painted. And
cool.
It made me appreciate how much a dichotomy that was, because I would tell, like, when friends of mine who were Marines found out that I wrote poetry, some would be like, are you gay? And I was just like,
oh,
yeah, but it was, I mean, the military mindset at the time. And I was like, how do you, like, that's amazing to me that that's the place you go.
Crazy.
Because like my poetry is about, like, I would write about Achilles and how, like, this man was obsessed with killing people because of this woman. And it was like, it's not like I'm writing, and certainly I wrote some floral stuff too, because I was always sort of considered myself romantic, but I realized that was a thread of me, and it was hard to balance those two in the Marines. And that's probably why I stayed away from yoga while I was in the Marine Corps, because it wasn't on my radar.
Of course.
And when I got out, then it was this expression. It was like, you know what? Okay, this is part of you too. And you need to make all the parts of you come together so that you can be one.
It's truly a journey, Dave, right?
Yeah,
it really is. It's funny then. And again, never any judgment ever from me, but that person who that was their correlation.
Yep.
And I, for me, and this is really one of the things I hope that my show does, is it expands the perspective. Not that person, it's not good or bad, right or wrong. There's no judgment. Just that it's funny when you see people's connection of, Marine and poetry. What does that mean? It's important that this show, that we can expand that perspective to say we're all kind of multidimensional, right? What are the gifts that we bring that other people can cherish, right? Or use from us. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but in a good way. So you know what I mean? So I always hope that there's perspective shifts that, Marine could be a poet, right? And a romantic and all these other cool things, just because you're, defending the world. And you have this, persona of strength. Clearly you do. I don't know. I hope people's perspective shifts, that we honor everybody's gifts, right? That's part of the mindfulness journey.
Yeah. And I'd like to think, that was 22 years ago. And I'd like to think certainly, I've kept a little bit in touch with him. I haven't talked to him lately, but I certainly feel like we've all grown. Like I know 20 years ago, I was a different person.
Oh, 100%.
And so it's part of the journey. And it's part of waking up to the reality that our diversity and our distinctions is what give us strength. And, even in the military, you try to find a way to distinguish yourself, even though it's kind of very cookie cutter too, right? Because you want people who share so much in common that they're willing to die for one another. And at the same time, you want to find a way to express yourself. So it's an interesting dichotomy in the military too.
Humans are interesting. It's
so true,
right? Even yourself, like your journey, even as I said to my husband the other day, I had that reading, right? And I peeled back in and I go, crap, it's another freaking layer I got to get through now, right? This 20-year journey. And it's like, you're never done. You're never done. Yeah. All right. I have a question for you. What do you think is the best way for someone to master their minds, right? I shared my story. I have the monkey mind, right? What I know you coach and you teach and you speak. And so what are some of your faves that you help people with?
Yeah, so I wrote about this in the Lighthouse Keeper. Lighthouse Keeper is a story about mastering your mind, and I got the idea from yoga class because I'd always go to yoga class and I'd talk to my students about different ways for them to think about how they observe the world.
Hmm.
And I used to say your life is a movie, and you're the director. Are you producing a comedy? Is it an adventure? Because it's all how you perceive things. It's the meaning that you assign to stuff. And one day I went into class and I said, your mind is an ocean, and that's where all your memories are. Everything that's ever happened to you, everybody you've ever met is in your mind, and your awareness, where you put your attention, is a lighthouse. And most people create patterns in their lives and routines, and so their lighthouse goes in the same pattern day after day. And we know, on average, I just heard this last night again from Jim Quick, author of the book Limitless, and he talked about on average humans have 60,000 thoughts a day,
Yeah.
and the problem is for most people, 90% of those thoughts are the exact same thoughts they had the day before.
That's right.
And so you think about that. Well, how are you going to change or expand your life, or even kind of take control and design your life if you're thinking the same things over and over again and you're not taking control of that? So one of the best ways I found to master my mind is journaling. And you do not realize the power you have when you start having a conversation with yourself with a pen and paper. And I like, and it's so funny because even when I was trying to break the ice, or this whatever was stopping me from becoming a writer, I wrote hundreds of pages trying to write these horror stories. And I would get stuck after like 6 weeks. I just couldn't understand it. And so I'd go away from it for a couple of years. And then I read a great book it's called Writing Down the Bones. And it tells you, get a pen and paper, set your timer on your watch for like 3 to 5 minutes, and don't let the pen come off the page. Just write whatever comes. Don't even you don't edit yourself. You don't worry about punctuation. Don't worry about margins. And I remember the first time I did this, I was like, okay, this feels weird. Why am I writing this? And then after the timer went off, I had like 5 pages of stuff. And I was like, where did that come from? Holy smokes. And so what you realize is there is an inner world. And if you think that we live just in a material world, then you don't understand quantum physics. You don't understand that there's a quantum world that is absolutely part of this existence. And so there's an inner world, and it takes courage and time. And you talked about, perseverance, but you can absolutely begin to master that inner world. And it's just a matter of writing things down so that you can start to develop a relationship with yourself and then define where you want to take yourself.
Yeah, it's finding clarity, right? It's shining that
Yep.
light, taking that muddy water, just cleaning that muddy water up so you can see with clarity really what your desires are, or what
Absolutely.
your dreams are, what your wishes are. And it's funny, I think I shared, I have 2 boys, they're 22 and 25, still live home. And COVID, where you going? But
Yep.
it's so funny because we talk about spirituality. Like, I'll have a reading and they'll say, what was it about? My older son's very curious. He's definitely intuitive. But he'll say to me, David's hysterical. I'll say something like, I had a bad day, I'm tired, whatever. And I'll say something negative. And he looks at me and he goes, the universe just heard that. Go, oh, he goes, you better reframe it. And I go, and you try to spit it, but we giggle because I'll say to him, the universe, and he goes, I know, wait, how, I have to rethink that. So it's just catching yourself.
Yeah.
And you can have fun with it, right? Like, we have fun in the family doing that, but it's just raising your awareness. And the funny thing is that raises our vibration, and then we attract those higher vibrational
Yep.
love and all those other things into our life, prosperity, right? All these things that we want. It's easy to understand. It's harder to execute because it's hard to quiet our minds. And the other thing I wanted to say about your journaling, and then you had 5 pages, and then you go back and you look at it, and I assume you said, like, as you were reading, you're like, where did that come from? Like,
for sure.
Right?
Yeah. Because you don't it's such an uncanny idea. And it's the idea that this even a short period of time of true presence where you are not thinking about what you're writing, you're just writing.
Yeah.
And I want to make that distinction for your audience because it's a fascinating place to be, because you realize it's not coming from here. It's coming from you. It's coming from you holistically. It's just like, I'm not thinking about what's writing. And then you look, and you're like, okay. And so I did the exercise 3 or 4 times. And by the 3rd or 4th time, I was like, well, can I use this incredible power and point it in a certain direction? And so I said, let me write a story. I want to just write a story. And I don't know I don't remember. I came up with some idea about someone's retirement party from like their office. And that was the only thing I put into my head. And then I wrote for 5 minutes. And it was this really interesting story about how some people were going to miss this person and then other people weren't going to miss him. And he really was, just this interesting person in the office. But you realize there is a power to being present with yourself. And you said it at the outset, right? Pattern interrupt. If you want to change your life, interrupt your pattern, because the moment you realize that you don't have to do what you're programmed to do, what you've programmed yourself to do over the course of your life, then you can be like, well, wait a minute, what if I did this differently? Or what if I wanted to take a different approach? What if I wanted a different experience? And when you do those things, that's when you really start to take the helm, if you will, of your life and start to steer your course for where you want to go.
Yeah. So that streaming, that writing exercise that you did right out of the gate, you put the ego aside.
Yes.
Because the brain is the ego, right? And your soul started writing, or whatever you want to call it, your inner child, right? Starts writing. So you take that filter out of the ego, which is always, you can't do that, right? The protection, it's really for protection, but it stops us in our tracks. What are some of the pitfalls that you see people experience when they start the shift, right? And they start to think about, well, what is my dream life look like? Or what should I be doing? Like, what's my uniqueness? What are some of the things that you see people kind of just get hung up on?
Well, part of the first thing is fear, and people have an aspiration and then they talk themselves out of it because they think it's going to be too hard or too challenging. And so they come up with this picture of why it won't work. And even if they try to make an effort for it, because they've had this negative self-talk, the action they take, they don't leverage all their potential. The action they take then comes up short. They look at the results and are like, well, gosh, this is going to be really hard. And that in turn has an impact on their certainty and their belief about being able to accomplish it the first time. So if they do it again, what happens is they take less potential, they use less of the action, the results come up short again. So that's one of the pitfalls. The other one is people, you talked about it earlier, people aren't clear about what they want. They think they want this thing, but what they really want is to be able to someone who is worthy of that thing, whether it's a new car or whether it's a new house or whether it's, fame and fortune. And I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, again, 80s, ancient history, but this was just when MTV was coming online. And so growing up in a small military base in North Carolina, now being able to see my favorite bands, and I liked Motley Crue or Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, all these heavy metal bands back then, was phenomenal. And so I was like, I want to be a rock and roll star, because you got to see their videos and you saw the best parts of their lives, right? So I was a dishwasher at there's a restaurant on the military base, and I was a dishwasher at the restaurant. So I saved up my money. I bought an electric guitar. I bought an amp. And I learned the basic riff of one Judas Priest song. And I was just like, where is my musical talent? Why am I not just blessed with this? And part of it was because my motive was bad. And that's the other thing I would say that trips people up is you have to understand the reason why you're doing something. And if you don't have a good motive, and what's a good motive? Well, there's kind of 4 classes of human experience. There's something that feels good for you doing it. It's also good for you. It's good for someone else. And because it's good for you and it's good for someone else, it serves a greater good. Then there's something that doesn't feel good. And this is the second class of human experience, but it's good for you. It's good for other people, and therefore it serves a greater good. And then the last 2 are, it feels good, but it's not good for you, not good for anybody else, doesn't serve a greater good. And it doesn't feel good and doesn't serve a greater good for anybody. And so you have to understand why you're doing something, because we know if you find a big enough why, you'll figure out the how. You'll figure out how it needs to happen, whatever. So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think in my experience, especially, since I've been on this, spiritual journey over the past 20 years, I think sometimes when you have clarity of what you want, or like for me as a business owner, what was the next thing I wanted to create, right? I felt there was a need and I got excited about something. The how showed up.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Sometimes we try so hard to find the how that we lose the why. And that's why we get all discombobulated and lose that clarity. So yeah, I think that the clearer we are, that's the intention, right? The quote, if we're really clear on what our intention is and what our thoughts are, the stuff shows up for us because vibrationally we're at that level to attract it, right? There's this whole rhythm thing in the universe, and we have to be part of that natural rhythm. So as humans, because of the ego, we fight it, right? Right? Don't they, right? It's like, well, that's not going to work. Like you said, that's not going to work because of X, Y, Z.
Yep.
And yet if we forget about that and think, well, wait a minute though, this feels good, right? I think I could serve, 10 people in my neighborhood, pursue it. The opportunity finds. I'll just share a really quick story. So, we hear often in business, I don't have the money. And so in my workshop, one of the things I say, don't ever let money stop you. If you think I'm the right person to help you with whatever's going on from sales and business, right? And money's the thing that's holding you back, please don't let that be the thing. Like, jump on a call with me. I'll figure out the budget with you. Like, we'll figure it out. So I walk away as a win and you walk away learning what I have to teach you. And so in my workshop, you teach, watch how I do my offer so that it's not like, okay, here comes the offer. Oh my God, I got to do the offer. It's a very seamless conversation, right? So there's pieces of the puzzle that we can do that welcomes people in to question instead of say, oh, this isn't for me, right? I can't do that. So we stop ourselves, and oftentimes it's because of money. And that should never be a reason we don't want to, if we want to learn something, don't let money stop you. So here's the story. One of the workshops I had gone to, and the person in the audience, this is when we did live, and they were like, I know I need this. They had gone bankrupt, lost their jobs, gone bankrupt, living with the in-laws. So they were in hard times, right? And the person stood up and he said, I know I need this. I know this is the next step. Literally, I have no credit card. Like, I have nowhere to get this money. And like, what do I do? Like, desperate. And people in the audience said, I'll contribute. So everybody, $5-10, whatever it was. And they were able to help this man. You never know where the how is going to come into it. Yeah. And most times it's where you least think it's going to come from. But his intention was so clear and pure that everybody was like, we get it. We've been there. Let's help this guy. Right. So you never know the how, but it finds a way to find you.
You know what? I go back to something you said at the beginning, Connie, and it's change is hard. And the reason why it's hard is because people don't realize what needs to change is you. Like, if you want to become a version of yourself you've never been, you can't stay the same. And if you want to accomplish something you've never accomplished before, you can't stay the same person. You have to grow into a different version of yourself. And that is uncomfortable. But the reality is, if you are resolved to make your outcome, with certainty, to make your outcome a reality, then you can get to what I like to call pleasantly uncomfortable. And I was talking with I have a results coach, and we were talking about this morning, where it's, if you go back to 60,000 thoughts a day, 90% same thoughts from yesterday. Well, how do you change your life? Well, you want to get pleasantly uncomfortable. And what that means to me is you're going to be on the edge of your comfort zone, because that's where all growth takes place. That's where the edge of life really is. But if you know where you're going, then it's going to be pleasant. Because so just to share with you, like, I've been working with this coach for now 6 months, and fantastic relationships. But like, this session today was all about like questions. And I just, like, she would say something. I'm like, oh, well, I need to ask this question. So I write down a question. And at the end, I had like 13 questions. And I'm like, I have nothing but questions, Debbie. And she's like, I know, isn't it awesome? I'm like, it is, because I don't know the answer to these questions. But now, because I've written them down, I'm going to have to sit with them and figure out the answers. And that's pleasant uncomfort. That's being pleasantly uncomfortable. So that's what makes change hard. But you have to realize, if you have the confidence in yourself and you have a vision and clarity on where you want to go, you can achieve anything you set your mind to, literally. And we've seen that throughout history, whether it's Edison with his light bulb. It took him 2 years to invent the light bulb. Henry Ford took him 18 months for his engineers who told him it was impossible to come up with an 8-cylinder engine, 8 years for the US to put a man on the moon after John F. Kennedy said it in 1961. So it's all about the perseverance and focus and clarity, and be willing to stay at the helm, and even in the toughest storms.
That's the thing. I think we bail one step often before the success will come, and we shortchange ourselves because fear creeps in, and you can't do this, and all those things. The mind is an interesting place, right? Humans, we're interesting. Fear is real, and I think I like how you said you're pleasantly uncomfortable, so that we do embrace change, even when we're kind of freaked out by it, right? Just find, but again, it goes back to, if you have clarity of your vision and what that means to you, your family, whatever it might be, it becomes easier to be uncomfortable, I think, right? Yep. When I have that clarity, I know where I'm going. I know this pain right now, or the uncomfortableness, this too shall pass, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely. And I go back to Edison. And depending on the version of his story you read, he either failed making the light bulb 1,000 times or 10,000 times.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that earlier this week, and I'm like, how many times have I failed at something 5 times and been like, that's it? And so I was like, well, what was it like for him to fail 50 times? What was it like for him to fail 250 times? What was it like for him to fail 1,000 times? Like, was he like, okay, I mean, at some point you have to realize that failure is nothing more than a process of elimination. Okay, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. There's got to be a path for me to go forward. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this.
That's
and
right.
so it really, but that comes down to your internal resolve and the willingness to commit to your dreams. And that's what, I think a lot of people struggle too, is with the idea that they want to be the person they are and yet get this thing that they've never gotten before. And it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work because, again, it comes back to frequency, right? In a lot of ways, you have to align yourself to that frequency. And that frequency often means becoming a bigger, better version of yourself to tune into that frequency. So, yeah.
It's interesting, and we're out of time, but I just want to share quickly with COVID, I had done everything live for 20 years, Dave. So I spoke live, right? I networked live, I trained live, everything was live. And then COVID hit and all my corporate clients were like, yeah, Con, we can't bring you into the training room. It's dangerous. I'm like, okay. So I remember I had hired a coach. I was spending money. I was rebranding. I knew I started to digitize the October before COVID hit.
Okay.
And I remember my husband's company closed, and we had no income, 2 kids in college. What do you do? Right? What do you do? Think about that. Well, for the first 24 hours, I just wanted to vomit constantly. What do you do? Right? You have no income, 2 kids in college. And I remember saying to my husband, I'm spending this money and I have a coach and I have a branding and I'm doing this. And he said, what do you think? Because he trusts me. See, there's another thing too, right? Having the right people in your orbit is important as well. And I said, I know I need to keep doing this, because what if we don't come back for 2 years? I have to figure out this digital stuff. And I think it's going to serve my business long term. Again, my intuition, my gut was telling me that. And now, thank God that I pushed and I spent that money instead of squirreling it and saying, no, we had money in the bank too. But that could have helped, let me tell you. But I spent it and I grew opportunities that I never would have had number one, COVID never happened. And I'm not taking, look, COVID sucked and people died and it was horrible, right?
Yep.
But if that never happened, I would have never paused enough to say, what else is my business and what else am I capable of? So that I'm telling you, feeling sick, like I vomited for a day because the worry of I have kids and responsibilities. Yet now you look back, 2 years later, all of that uncomfortableness had to happen for me to be where I am today and the opportunities that I'm facing. And now I'm on the trajectory to create. My kids are now graduated with college. They're talking about taking over the business. Before I would never even, I never wanted to put that pressure on them. But now I have a purpose for the next decade of building that legacy. If they want to take it over, awesome. If they don't, I could sell the business. Never 22 years ago, that wasn't even a thought process. So It's this, we're evolutionary. We're growing every day as long as we allow it, right? So to feel that nauseousness for the 24 hours, but then it was like, all right, well, now what do I have to do, right? There has to be clarity in my approach and there has to be clarity in my actions. And that's the only way I'm going to get some kind of reaction. But you have to, I'm not saying don't feel the fear, but at some point you have to park it and shift and think logically, well, what can I control and what can I do? And that's hard. This is hard stuff. We're not talking about easy maneuvering, right? To change our lives.
I love what you said, Connie, because whenever you have fear, whenever you have doubt, the recipe and antidote for that is action. You have to take action.
Yeah.
And, in the Marines, we had a saying, do something right, do something wrong, but do something. Because when you are in conflict and when you're in combat with someone, you don't have time to think, well, what would be the perfect scenario for this to work out all right? You have to figure out, okay, what can I do now that's going to extend this a little bit longer, give me a little bit more advantage? And you have to keep putting yourself in that situation, but taking action is the recipe for doubt and fear. Absolutely.
Yeah. What was the movie? Tom Hanks, I think it was Tom Hanks, was the pilot that landed here in New York. That the something happened.
I know.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That, remember they did in the movie, they were crucifying him. You should have landed here. You should have landed there, because they did the evaluation with the time frame and everything. And at the last second, he came forward and said, "You're doing it based on information we have now. I didn't have that information when the engine blew." And when they did that, giving a 9-second delay, so you can think clearly of, all right, this is happening. What do I need to do? There's an element of humanness, right, of thinking. And when they added that 9-second, they said, you really did save all those souls, because any other alternative, you would have crashed and burned. So it's exactly what you just said. He took action, but that 9 seconds, obviously he was a genius at flying because he had a lifetime of experience, but it's doing something. And he hopefully made the logical decision. So all of the computer algorithms and everything, we would have failed. So that human component again, and that human capacity to see things from the soul level, I think is real important for us.
No, Connie, I love that. And it really comes back to this idea that fear is energy undirected, right? If you are fearful, then you're energy undirected. And if he had been fearful, then obviously the movie would never have been made, because it would have turned out completely differently. But it takes to going back to faith in the universe and God and infinite intelligence, whatever you want to call it. And having that, being able to get to the presence of mind, say, okay, what do I need to do in this moment right now? I can't think 20 minutes ahead. I can't think 20 seconds ahead. What do I need to do now? So it's going to extend things to the next moment.
Which is the same thing in the military, right? I think when you're in a scary situation or a dangerous situation, you have to go second by second as to literally, do I even make this step? Literally, do I make this step, or am I going to land on a landmine, for instance, right?
No, I'll tell, so I know we're at time, but I'll tell you the story. So when we landed in Somalia, I was given the assignment to set up a roadblock outside of the airport, Mogadishu airport, and confiscate weapons from anyone trying to come in. And the guidance we had, our rules of engagement were that if a weapon was pointed at us, we could shoot someone. But if they didn't point a weapon at us, they could hold on to the weapon and we couldn't do anything. And so this was literally happened probably within the first 15 minutes. So it's like 5 a.m. The sun is just coming up. We set up the roadblock, and the Somalis had these vehicles called technicals. So it'd be like an old Toyota or Datsun pickup truck, but they would have a 50 caliber machine gun mounted in the back of the truck. And so we're in this roadblock, and it's like we're just kind of out in the open, and probably about 50 meters in front of us, one of these technical vehicles pops up, and there's a 50 caliber machine gun, and the guy is pointing it off to the right side, so it's not pointing towards us. But for this moment that felt like it was 10 minutes, we just stood staring at one another, and it was like, okay, it was almost like the Wild West. You're right, and I have like Marines that are on a hair trigger to like defend and go into action, and we just waited, and then probably it only lasted 10 or 15 seconds, and then they drove off again. But it's those situations where you have to have that laser focus on, okay, what do we do to extend this? And extending in that case meant don't take action, don't shoot anybody. So
scary. It's scary. Here's the thing. What we're talking about, right, is minor, our evolution, right? Change, our thoughts, all these things. It's really minor with what you just described, right? They're truly life or death moments.
Sure.
What we're talking about is an expansion of self. They're not life or death. The funny thing is they could be life changing. Exactly. Which is the cool piece of the puzzle here, right? That we're talking about. Exactly. I love you, my friend. I
likewise.
Oh my goodness. I'm so happy we met. And thank you, Zach, for sending Dave my way. Everyone, I really think you need more Dave in your life. So please go to davidrichardsauthor.com. That's the website, or email him if you have questions. David is open to sharing some insight. It's david.richards, plural, 51, the number 51, @gmail.com. I promise I will put that in the show notes so that you can easily find David. Again, thank you for being on. This has truly been a joy conversing with you. And again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your service, because I get to put my head on a warm pillow at night. And, with everything going on in Ukraine, like, we're really blessed in the United States. And I hope everybody really realizes that. So thank you, my friends. I'm going to cry.
Connie, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Real honor. Thank you so much. And everyone, thank you for joining us. I hope you join us weekly as we question, build, and discover together. Yes, I know, change. You want to stop breathing. Don't stop breathing. Move forward. Take some of the tips that my guest and I share with you and implement them. Just what we've been talking about today. Having information is a beautiful thing that Dave and I shared today, right? Through our stories and our conversation. Doing something with that information, that's where the magic starts happening. So take one of the tips, take one of the ideas, try the journaling for 3 minutes. Everybody has 3 minutes that they can do that journaling exercise that Dave shared at the onset, plus all the other tips that he's given. Again, buy the book. One more time, tell us the 2 titles, The Lighthouse.
The Lighthouse Keeper, The Story of Mastering Your Mind, and Whisk and Yoga About Finding Your Purpose in Life.
You need more, David. Buy the books, read the books. That's all I got to say. Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Thank you, David, for having a great show with me. Appreciate it. Bye, everybody.